All right, so we're diving deep into A Course in Miracles today, and you sent over quite a collection of excerpts from the text and workbook for students, all the way to the manual for teachers.
Yeah, we even have some of those review sections. It's
Oh, wow.
it's a pretty ambitious spread, but I think that's what we're here for.
Exactly, and I think the goal today is to really unpack how this course challenges traditional views of sin, the world, and even the body.
Right.
But before we get too metaphysical,
Yeah.
let's start with one of the most prominent themes that runs throughout A Course in Miracles forgiveness now.
Yeah.
This isn't your typical, let bygones be bygones kind of forgiveness. A Course in Miracles presents forgiveness as the very key to understanding reality itself.
It really does flip the script, doesn't it? Because it argues that there are really only two thought systems, fear and love.
Right.
And forgiveness becomes the act of choosing love. And in doing so, dismantling the fear-based reality that the ego constructs.
And there's this powerful line in the text that says, to teach is to demonstrate. There are only two thought systems, and you demonstrate that you believe one or the other is true all the time.
Wow.
It's like every single moment is a choice point pushing us towards one of those systems.
Every thought, every action, every interaction becomes a demonstration of which system we're aligned with?
Okay, so how does this play out in practice? Because the workbook for students has those practical exercises, right?
Right.
What's a good example of how the course actually guides us towards this radical forgiveness?
Lesson 10 is a great place to start. It introduces this idea, my thoughts do not mean anything. Now, that's not about negating the power of thought at all, but rather recognizing that the ego infuses thoughts with fear-based meaning. It really twists our perception of reality.
It's like our thoughts become these self-fulfilling prophecies fueled by the ego's agenda.
Exactly. The ego thrives on judgment. It uses our thoughts to constantly interpret and assign meaning, often in ways that reinforce separation and fear. But the Course suggests that thoughts themselves in their pure form are neutral.
Right.
It's the meaning we layer onto them that dictates their impact.
So by practicing my thoughts do not mean anything, we're essentially stripping away those layers of ego-driven interpretation,
Yeah.
creating space for a more genuine experience of reality.
And in that space, forgiveness becomes possible because we're no longer clinging to those fear-based meanings, those stories the ego tells us about ourselves and others.
That's really interesting now that the manual for teachers delves into these different levels of teaching, but then throws us a curveball by saying levels themselves are an illusion, just like time, everything's happening simultaneously in God's plan.
Right.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is that the Course isn't negating the value of teaching or the process of spiritual growth at all. It's challenging our linear understanding of those concepts.
So those levels aren't steps on a ladder, but more like facets of a multidimensional reality that we're only glimpsing from our limited perspective.
Precisely. And the manual describes 3 stages a teacher of God goes through. It's that third stage that I find particularly compelling, a period of relinquishment.
Okay, let's unpack that. What does relinquishment look like in this context?
It's about detaching from the ego's value system, where we're constantly chasing after the desirable and fearing the valueless.
Right.
The teacher in this stage begins to recognize that true value lies not in external things or achievements, but in aligning with God's will, which often looks very different from the ego's desires.
So it's a surrender to a higher purpose.
Yeah.
A letting go of the ego's tight grip on what we think we want and need.
And in that surrender, the teacher finds true peace. Not the temporary peace of getting what they want,
Right.
but the lasting peace of aligning with their true purpose, which transcends
Right.
the fleeting desires of the ego.
It's a profound shift in perspective. Now let's talk about another concept that A Course in Miracles really redefines the body.
Yeah.
It's not our enemy,
Well,
but it's not our true identity either.
right. The Course presents the body as a tool for communication, a vehicle for experience in this world, but not the essence of who we are, almost like a temporary vessel for the soul.
And there's this thought-provoking line from What is the Body? It says, the body is a fence the Son of God imagines he has built to separate parts of his self from other parts. That imagery really drives home this concept of separation as self-imposed.
It's so powerful. The body isn't the problem. It's the meaning we assign to it, the way we use it to reinforce the illusion of separation from each other and from God.
We create these boundaries, these fences, to protect our ego's sense of individuality.
Right.
But in doing so, we limit our capacity for connection and love.
And that's where forgiveness becomes essential. It's the key to dismantling those fences, to recognizing that our true identity lies in our shared connection as God's children.
It's like forgiveness unlocks a deeper level of empathy,
Yeah.
allowing us to see past the physical form and recognize the shared spark of divinity in each other.
Exactly. And that recognition is the foundation for true unity and healing.
Okay, so we got forgiveness levels and the body. Let's move on to another concept, that A Course in Miracles redefines miracles.
Yeah.
They're not these supernatural events, right?
Right.
They're more like natural outcomes of choosing forgiveness and aligning with God's will.
The Course describes miracles as shifts in perception. When we choose forgiveness, we're essentially aligning ourselves with a higher level of awareness, which allows us to see the world differently.
And that shift in perception can lead to all sorts of seemingly miraculous experiences,
Right.
from healing to finding unexpected solutions to problems that seem insurmountable.
It's like we're tapping into a different frequency, one that's not bound by the limitations of the ego's fear-based reality.
The text says that miracles rearrange perception, place levels in true perspective, and are natural signs of forgiveness. So they're not defying the laws of nature, but rather revealing a deeper understanding of those laws,
Exactly.
one that's rooted in love and interconnectedness.
And there's this beautiful quote that captures that essence: miracles are seen in light, and light and strength are one.
That's so powerful.
Mm.
It suggests that inner strength, the kind that comes from aligning with truth and choosing forgiveness, is what empowers us to perceive and create miracles.
Exactly. When we're rooted in that inner strength, we're able to see beyond the limitations of the ego's perception and tap into the limitless possibilities that exist within God's reality.
Okay, this is a lot to take in. Let's pause here and give our listeners some time to process these mind-bending concepts. We'll be back in a moment to delve even deeper into A Course in Miracles and its implications for understanding the world and ourselves.
Welcome back. We've been exploring some pretty profound shifts in perspective that A Course in Miracles offers, particularly around forgiveness and the ego.
And it's interesting how the Course reframes even our understanding of sin.
Right.
It's not about specific actions being inherently bad, right?
Exactly. The Course suggests that sin at its core is the belief in separation from God. It's that fundamental misunderstanding of our true nature
Right.
that leads to fear, guilt, and all the projections we cast onto the world and others.
So it's less about being bad and more about forgetting who we really are, that we are inherently part of a loving, unified whole.
Precisely. And that forgetting is where the ego really digs in its heels, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It thrives on keeping us stuck in that cycle of guilt and separation, constantly seeking evidence to reinforce its distorted worldview.
It's like the ego's built a whole case against us, using past mistakes, perceived flaws, anything it can get its hands on to maintain that illusion of separation and keep us playing small.
And it's through that fear, that sense of unworthiness, that the ego exerts control, preventing us from stepping into our true power as extensions of God's love.
Okay, but if sin is the belief in separation, then what does salvation look like in this context? Is it about being rescued from something external?
Not at all. Salvation, as presented in A Course in Miracles, is about remembering who we truly are. It's about waking up from that dream of separation and returning to the awareness of our unity with God.
So it's an internal process of awakening, a shift in perception,
Exactly.
rather than some external event or intervention.
And forgiveness is the catalyst for that awakening. When we choose forgiveness, we align ourselves with the truth of our being. And in that alignment, we experience a profound sense of liberation.
Liberation from those chains of guilt, fear, and judgment that the ego uses to keep us bound.
And that freedom allows us to experience the peace and joy that are our birthright as Ganesh children, not as something we need to earn or achieve, but as our natural state of being.
Okay, so we've talked about forgiveness as the key to dismantling this idea of sin and accessing salvation. But the ego, as we've discussed, is quite sneaky. What are some of the defense mechanisms it uses to hold on to its power?
Projection is a classic tactic. The ego is constantly trying to shift blame outward to make it seem like our problems are caused by external factors rather than our own thought patterns.
So instead of taking responsibility for our own feelings and reactions, we end up blaming other people's situations even the world itself, for our unhappiness.
It's a way for the ego to protect its fragile sense of self, to maintain the illusion that it's not the source of our suffering.
And then there's denial, which is another one of the ego's go-to moves.
Yeah.
It's like refusing to see the truth even when it's staring us right in the face.
Denial allows the ego to maintain a false sense of control, to cling to its limited perception of reality, even when that perception is causing us pain.
So we might deny our own feelings, ignore red flags in relationships, or convince ourselves that everything is fine when it's clearly not, all in an effort to avoid facing the discomfort of truth.
And these defenses can be incredibly subtle. It's not always easy to recognize when the ego is pulling the strings. That's why self-awareness is so crucial.
We have to learn to pay attention to our thoughts, feelings, and motivations, to notice those patterns of blame, denial, and projection that keep us trapped in the ego's web of illusion. It's like shining a light on those shadowy parts of ourselves so we can choose differently.
Exactly. And that's where the Holy Spirit can be such a valuable guide, helping us see through the ego's illusions and make choices that align with our true selves.
Okay, so we've talked about forgiveness and salvation
Mm-hmm.
and some of the ego's defense mechanisms, but how does all of this relate to the idea of A Course in Miracles as a path to enlightenment?
Enlightenment in the context of the Course is about recognizing our oneness with God and extending that awareness to all of creation. It's about transcending the ego's limited perception and experiencing the world through the lens of love and forgiveness.
So it's not about becoming detached from the world or seeking some blissful state of isolation,
Right.
but rather about transforming our experience of the world, seeing it as a reflection of love and unity.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective leads to a profound transformation both within ourselves and in our relationships with others.
It's like stepping into a new reality,
Yeah.
one where peace and joy are not fleeting emotions, but our natural state of being.
And the Course emphasizes that this transformation is not about denying the world or escaping from it. It's about engaging with it in a more compassionate and loving way, recognizing the opportunity for spiritual growth that exists in every moment, every interaction.
That's a beautiful vision,
Yeah.
but it also sounds incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
It seems to require a radical level of honesty, a willingness to let go of deeply ingrained patterns of thinking and behaving.
It's definitely not an easy path, but the rewards, as the Course promises, are immeasurable. A life filled with peace, joy, and a deep sense of purpose that flows from knowing who we truly are.
And it seems like the journey itself is transformative, even if we don't reach some ultimate state of enlightenment.
Yeah.
The process of learning to forgive, to question our perceptions, to choose love over fear, that process itself is incredibly healing and liberating.
It's about taking it one step at a time, one lesson at a time, and trusting in the guidance of the Holy Spirit, that inner voice of love and wisdom that's always available to us.
And remembering that we're not alone on this journey.
Right.
We have each other, and we have the unwavering love and support of God.
Now, speaking of the Holy Spirit, let's dive a bit deeper into this concept. It's more than just a theological idea, right?
Yeah.
It's a practical guide for navigating this journey of spiritual awakening.
Absolutely. A Course in Miracles presents the Holy Spirit as that part of our minds that remains connected to God, our inner compass, our source of strength, wisdom, and guidance.
It's not some external force, but an integral part of who we are, a constant presence that we can learn to tune into.
But we have to choose to listen, to create space for that guidance to emerge amidst all the noise of the ego's chatter.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that willingness to be guided, to surrender our ego's need for control and trust in a power greater than ourselves.
It's like shifting our attention from the ego's frantic radio station to a quieter, more profound frequency where the Holy Spirit whispers its wisdom.
And the Holy Spirit communicates in subtle ways through intuition, inspiration, a sense of inner peace, and even those synchronicities that seem to orchestrate events in our lives.
So it's about learning to pay attention to those subtle cues, those inner nudges that often get drowned out by the ego's demands and fears, trusting the path that feels most aligned with our hearts.
Precisely. And the more we practice listening to the Holy Spirit, the more we strengthen that connection, and the easier it becomes to discern its guidance from the ego's often misleading directives.
Now, forgiveness is central to A Course in Miracles, and the Holy Spirit seems to play a key role in helping us navigate this often challenging process.
Forgiveness can feel impossible when we're grappling with hurt and resentment. The Holy Spirit helps us see forgiveness not as condoning harmful actions, but as a choice to release the hold those actions have over us.
It's about recognizing that holding on to anger and resentment only hurts us in the end, keeping us tethered to the past. and preventing us from experiencing true freedom and peace.
Exactly. Forgiveness is about freeing ourselves from that prison of the past, recognizing that we have the power to choose how we respond to those experiences, even the most painful ones.
And the Holy Spirit helps us access that power, to see that freedom is possible, even in the face of what might seem like unforgivable acts.
It offers us a different perspective, a way of seeing the situation through the lens of compassion and understanding, recognizing that everyone, including those who have hurt us, is ultimately seeking love and wholeness, even if their actions don't reflect that.
So it's not about denying the pain or minimizing the harm that's been done, but about choosing to see the situation differently, to see the potential for healing and transformation, both within ourselves and in our relationships with others.
And that shift in perspective is what allows us to experience true forgiveness, both for ourselves and for others, releasing the burden of the past and opening ourselves to the possibility of a more loving and peaceful future.
But how do we actually do that? How do we access the Holy Spirit's guidance and allow it to lead us to forgiveness, especially when it feels so difficult?
A Course in Miracles emphasizes the importance of prayer and meditation as practices for connecting with the Holy Spirit, creating that space for stillness and inner listening.
So it's about quieting the mind, stepping away from the constant stream of thoughts and emotions that often cloud our perception, and opening ourselves to a higher power, a deeper wisdom.
And prayer in this context isn't about petitioning God for favors or outcomes. It's about aligning our will with God's will, surrendering our ego's need for control, and trusting in the guidance of the Holy Spirit.
It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers, that there's a greater intelligence at work, and that by aligning with that intelligence, we can tap into a wisdom and peace that surpasses our limited understanding.
And as we practice prayer and meditation, we cultivate an inner stillness that allows us to hear the Holy Spirit's whispers, those subtle nudges that guide us toward truth and healing.
It's like developing a sensitivity to those whispers, learning to distinguish them from the ego's often louder and more insistent voice.
And the more we practice, the easier it becomes to recognize the Holy Spirit's presence in our lives, to trust in its guidance, even when it leads us down unfamiliar paths.
Because the path of forgiveness, as we've discussed, is not always easy. It can be challenging, even painful at times.
Right.
But the Holy Spirit offers unwavering support, gently guiding us towards the peace and freedom that await us on the other side of forgiveness.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about relationships, which A Course in Miracles addresses in a very specific way, particularly those the Course calls special relationships.
Okay, what makes these relationships special in the context of the Course?
A Course in Miracles suggests that these relationships are often based on the ego's need for validation and completion. Instead of seeing each other as equals, we project our own needs and expectations onto our partners, friends, and family members, hoping they'll fill the void within us.
So instead of approaching relationships from a place of wholeness and shared love, we're essentially looking to the other person to complete us, to give us what we believe we lack.
Exactly. We use these relationships to try to get love and acceptance that we believe we don't have within ourselves, and that sets us up for disappointment, because no one can ultimately fulfill those needs for us.
It's like trying to build a house on a foundation of sand.
Yeah.
It might look stable for a while, but eventually it's going to crumble.
And the Course suggests that true love and fulfillment can only be found within ourselves in our relationship with God.
So it's not about giving up relationships altogether,
No.
but about transforming them, about shifting the foundation from neediness and expectation to love and acceptance.
Exactly. A Course in Miracles encourages us to see our relationships through the lens of forgiveness, to release our judgments and expectations, and to love each other unconditionally, recognizing the inherent wholeness in ourselves and others.
It's about allowing those relationships to become a reflection of that wholeness, a space where love and acceptance can flow freely without the burden of trying to get something from the other person.
And as we practice forgiveness and release our ego's need for control, our relationships become more peaceful, joyful, and authentic. We can connect from a place of shared love and understanding, rather than neediness and projection.
It's a beautiful vision, but it also sounds incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
It's like rewiring our entire approach to relationships,
Yeah.
letting go of deeply ingrained patterns that often stem from childhood wounds and societal conditioning.
It's definitely not easy work, but A Course in Miracles promises that as we practice forgiveness and surrender to the guidance of the Holy Spirit, our relationships can become a source of profound joy and healing.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, exploring forgiveness, the Holy Spirit, and the complex dynamics of relationships. But Course in Miracles also has a lot to say about the nature of reality itself. And it's not the reality we typically perceive, is it?
The Course suggests that the world we see, the one we experience through our senses, is ultimately an illusion, a projection of our ego's thoughts and beliefs.
So it's not that the physical world doesn't exist,
Right.
but that we're misperceiving it, filtering it through the lens of the ego's limited and fear-based perspective.
Exactly. We're seeing the world through a filter of judgment, separation, and lack. And that filter distorts our perception, creating a reality that's often filled with suffering and conflict.
But the Course suggests that there's another reality beyond that, a reality that's based on love, unity, and peace, a reality that's already whole and complete.
And that reality is always available to us. But we have to choose to see it.
Right.
We have to dismantle the ego's illusions and shift our perception.
Okay, but how do we do that? How do we shift our perception and experience that higher reality, that truth that the Course points to?
The Course emphasizes forgiveness as the key. It's through forgiveness that we dismantle the ego's illusions and awaken to the truth of our being, recognizing that we are not separate, that we are part of a unified whole.
So when we forgive ourselves and others, we're clearing away those layers of perception that keep us trapped in the ego's limited reality, allowing the light of truth to shine through.
Exactly. Forgiveness is the path to enlightenment, the way to experience the world as it truly is, as a reflection of God's love and perfection.
And that shift in perception changes everything, right? It's not just some abstract concept. It has practical implications for how we experience the world, how we relate to others, and how we understand ourselves.
Absolutely. It transforms our relationships, our experience of the world, and our understanding of ourselves. We begin to see the interconnectedness of all things, recognizing the spark of divinity within each other, and experiencing a deep sense of peace and joy that's not dependent on external circumstances.
It sounds like a complete paradigm shift, a radical reorientation of our entire worldview.
It is. A Course in Miracles challenges us to question everything we thought we knew about reality and to embrace a new way of seeing the world and ourselves, one that's rooted in love, forgiveness, and the recognition of our shared divinity.
It's a call to awaken from that dream of separation and to step into the fullness of who we truly are.
And it's a journey that's available to anyone who's willing to do the work of forgiveness and surrender to the guidance of the Holy Spirit.
Now, the Course also suggests that the world we perceive is a reflection of our thoughts. It's a pretty mind-bending concept,
It is, but it's also incredibly empowering.
right?
It means we're not victims of circumstance, that we have the power to shape our reality through our thoughts and beliefs.
So if we're seeing a world full of suffering and conflict, it's because we're holding on to thoughts of fear, judgment, and separation. Those thoughts are shaping our perception, creating the reality we experience.
Exactly. And if we want to experience a different reality, a more peaceful and loving world, we have to change our thinking. We have to release those thoughts that keep us trapped in a cycle of suffering and embrace thoughts that align with love, forgiveness, and unity.
And that's where the workbook for students comes in, right? It provides those practical exercises for transforming our minds, for shifting from fear-based thinking to love-based thinking.
The workbook offers specific practices for identifying and releasing those negative thought patterns that keep us stuck in the ego's limited reality. It's about retraining our minds, replacing those habitual patterns of fear and judgment with thoughts that align with truth and love.
For example, there's that powerful exercise in Lesson 132, I loose the world from all I thought it was.
That exercise encourages us to let go of our preconceived notions about the world, those rigid beliefs and judgments that cloud our perception, and to see it with fresh eyes, with a willingness to perceive the beauty, love, and interconnectedness that are always present, but often hidden beneath the veil of the ego's illusions.
It's like hitting the reset button on our perception, allowing us to see the world as a reflection of God's love rather than the ego's fears. And as we practice these exercises, we gradually transform our minds and our experience of the world begins to shift.
It's not about denying the existence of the physical world, but about seeing it differently, experiencing it through the lens of love and forgiveness, recognizing that it's not separate from us, but a part of us, a reflection of our own consciousness.
So it's not about escaping from the world, but about transforming it, both within ourselves and in our interactions with others.
Exactly. A Course in Miracles invites us to become active participants in the creation of a more loving and peaceful world, starting with our own thoughts and beliefs.
Okay, we've talked about forgiveness, the Holy Spirit, and
Yeah.
the illusory nature of the world, but let's circle back to the ego, because it seems to be the root of so much of the suffering the Course addresses.
The ego, as we've discussed, is that part of our minds that clings to the illusion of separation. It thrives on judgment comparison and the belief in lack, constantly seeking to reinforce its sense of individuality and control.
And it uses those defense mechanisms we talked about, denial, projection, all those sneaky tactics, to maintain its grip on our perception, keeping us trapped in a cycle of fear and separation.
And there's that chilling quote from the text about the ego's ultimate goal. The ego teaches that hell is in the future, for this is what all its teaching is directed to. Hell is its goal.
It's a stark reminder that if we continue to identify with the ego, if we allow it to dictate our thoughts and actions, we're essentially choosing a path of suffering, perpetuating the illusion of separation that keeps us from experiencing true peace and joy.
But the Course also offers hope. It reminds us that the Holy Spirit, that inner voice of love and wisdom, is always available to guide us back to truth, to help us see through the ego's illusions and choose a different path.
So it's about learning to distinguish between the ego's voice, which is often loud and demanding, and the Holy Spirit's voice, which is often quieter, more subtle, but infinitely more wise and compassionate.
And that discernment comes through practice, through choosing forgiveness over judgment, love over fear, recognizing that we are not our egos, we are not our bodies, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and our true essence is love.
It's a powerful reminder, and it seems like A Course in Miracles is ultimately a guide to remembering that truth, to awakening to our true nature as God's children, which is the foundation for experiencing lasting peace and happiness.
Exactly. It's a journey of spiritual transformation, a path to inner peace and liberation. And it's available to anyone who's willing to do the work of forgiveness, self-awareness, and surrendering to a power greater than themselves.
Okay, let's take a quick pause to let all of this sink in. When we come back, we'll shift gears and explore how we can integrate the teachings of A Course in Miracles into our daily lives, turning these profound concepts into practical tools for transformation. Stay with us. Welcome back. We've been on quite a journey exploring the intricate concepts of A Course in Miracles, but let's shift gears a bit and talk about how we can actually apply these teachings to our everyday lives. Because it can't just be about intellectual understanding, right? It has to translate into real change.
Absolutely. A Course in Miracles isn't meant to be just a philosophy to ponder. It's a guide for living. And the workbook for students is filled with practical exercises designed to shift your perception and bring those teachings to life.
So it's about putting those principles into action, seeing the world as a training ground for forgiveness, and choosing love over fear in every situation.
Precisely. And the workbook offers a structured approach with daily lessons that guide you through the process of mental and emotional transformation.
Okay, so what are some of the key takeaways from the workbook that we can start applying today? Because it can feel overwhelming to know where to begin with such a dense text.
One of the most accessible and powerful practices is the use of affirmations.
Hmm.
These aren't just feel-good slogans. They're designed to reprogram your mind, replacing those deep-seated fear-based thoughts with love-based thoughts.
So it's like actively rewiring our thought patterns,
Yeah.
interrupting the ego's default negativity bias.
Exactly. And the workbook provides a variety of affirmations that address different aspects of the ego's thought system, for example. There's the classic affirmation, I am as God created me.
That one really resonates with me. It's a direct reminder of our inherent wholeness, that beneath all the layers of conditioning and ego-driven beliefs, there's this perfect essence that's always there.
And by repeating that affirmation, you're essentially reclaiming that truth, reminding yourself of who you truly are beyond the limitations the ego imposes.
What are some other examples of affirmations that can help us shift our perspective?
Another powerful one is, my mind holds only what I think with God. This helps you discern between thoughts that stem from the ego and thoughts that align with the Holy Spirit's guidance.
So it's about becoming more aware of the source of our thoughts, recognizing when we're caught in the ego's web of fear and judgment, and choosing to focus on thoughts that bring us peace, clarity, and love.
And by consciously choosing those thoughts, we're essentially retraining our minds, weakening the ego's grip, and creating space for the Holy Spirit's wisdom to emerge.
Now, the Course also emphasizes the importance of recognizing that the world is a reflection of our thoughts. It's a concept that can be hard to grasp, especially when we're bombarded with external events that seem to contradict that idea.
It's not about denying the existence of the physical world or claiming that we're solely responsible for everything that happens, but the Course suggests that our perception of the world is shaped by our beliefs. If we're seeing a world full of conflict and suffering, it's because we're projecting our own inner turmoil outward.
So it's like we're wearing these tinted glasses that distort our view, and those glasses are crafted by our own fears, judgments, and limiting beliefs.
And the workbook offers tools to help us remove those glasses to see the world with fresh eyes. Remember that powerful exercise from Lesson 132? I loose the world from all I thought it was.
I love that one. It's like giving ourselves permission to let go of those ingrained perceptions and encounter the world anew with a sense of openness and wonder.
And by loosening our grip on those fixed beliefs, we create space for a new reality to emerge, one that's more aligned with love, peace, and the interconnectedness of all things.
It's a radical shift in perspective, but it's also incredibly liberating. Now we've talked about forgiveness affirmations and the idea of the world as a reflection of our thoughts. But the Course also highlights the importance of relationships as opportunities for spiritual growth.
Relationships, especially those special relationships we discussed earlier, can be incredibly potent catalysts for transformation. But as we've explored, the ego often uses relationships to try to get its needs met, leading to disappointment and conflict.
So it's about recognizing those patterns of projection and neediness, understanding that we can't look to others to fill the void within ourselves.
Exactly. True fulfillment comes from within, from our connection to God. And when we approach relationships from that place of wholeness, we can see them as opportunities for shared growth, for extending love and forgiveness, and for deepening our connection to the divine.
It's like shifting from a transactional view of relationships where we're trying to get something from the other person to a more transformative view where the focus is on shared love acceptance and spiritual growth.
And that shift requires a willingness to let go of judgment, to see the other person as a reflection of ourselves, and to recognize that even in the midst of conflict, there's an opportunity for healing and deeper understanding.
It's a challenging but incredibly rewarding approach to relationships now. As we wrap up this deep dive into A Course in Miracles, it's clear that this text offers a profound path to inner peace and liberation. But it requires a commitment to practice, to self-awareness, and to the willingness to see the world and ourselves through a different lens.
It's a journey, not a destination. And the beauty of it is that every step we take towards forgiveness, towards love, towards recognizing our true identity as God's children, brings us closer to the peace and joy that we're all seeking.
It's about taking those teachings not just as intellectual concepts, but as practical tools for navigating our daily lives moment by moment, choice by choice. As we do, that we gradually transform our experience of the world, creating a reality that's more aligned with love, peace, and unity.
And that's a reality worth striving for. It's a reminder that we have the power to choose a different path, a path that leads us back to our true nature as God's children, where love, forgiveness, and peace are not just ideals, but our lived experience.
This has been an incredible deep dive. It's a lot to process, but the message of forgiveness, love, and remembering our true nature is so powerful. It's a reminder that we all have the potential for transformation, for healing, and for experiencing the peace of God that lies within us. So here's a final thought to ponder. If A Course in Miracles is right, and the world is a reflection of our thoughts, what kind of world are you creating with your thoughts today?